My son was dead. Michael Wallace, 39 years old, lay cold in that mahogany casket, while I stood there drowning in grief so thick I could barely breathe. But here's what shattered me even more than his death. As I looked around that funeral home in Auckland, expecting to see aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, I saw emptiness. Row after row of empty chairs, just me and her, Lauren. My daughter-in-law stood near the back, and that's when I noticed it. That smile, not sad, not grieving. A smile that made my blood run cold. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Catherine Wallace. I'm 65 years old, and I've lived in Auckland my entire life. I raised Michael and his sister Emma as a single mother after my husband died when the kids were young. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and serving lunch at a cafe during the day, to give them everything. Every dollar I earned went to their education, their clothes, their dreams. I sacrificed my own life for 40 years so they could have better ones. Michael grew up to be a software engineer, married Lauren 6 years ago in what I thought was a beautiful ceremony. I spent $12,000 on that wedding, money I'd saved from my pension and a small inheritance from my mother. Lauren seemed sweet then, always calling me Mum, always smiling. But that smile at the funeral? That wasn't sweet. That was something else entirely. The service was supposed to start at 2 o'clock on that gray Tuesday afternoon. I'd expected the room to be full. Michael had friends, colleagues, a whole life I thought I understood. Where were they? Why was no one here? My hands trembled as I clutched the tissue in my palm, mascara running down my wrinkled cheeks. The funeral director kept glancing at his watch, clearly uncomfortable with the emptiness. Then Lauren walked toward me. She wore black, yes, but her makeup was perfect, her hair styled like she was going to a cocktail party. And that smile, God, that smile, it grew wider as she approached. My heart hammered against my ribs. Something was terribly, horrifically wrong. "Catherine," she said softly, standing so close I could smell her expensive perfume. "Do you want to know the truth?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper. "What truth?" She reached into her designer handbag, a bag that probably cost more than my monthly pension, and pulled out a manila envelope. She pressed it into my shaking hands, her fingers cold against mine. "Read this. Read it all. Then you'll understand why you're sitting here alone." And then she left, just turned around and walked out, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving me standing there beside my son's casket with an envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside were papers, documents, printed emails, bank statements. I started reading, and the words blurred through my tears. Then they came into focus. And that's when everything I thought I knew about my son, about my family, about the last 40 years of my life, shattered into pieces so small I didn't know if I could ever put them back together. The funeral director approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Wallace, should we begin?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe, because what I was reading in that envelope revealed a betrayal so deep, so calculated, so utterly devastating that I felt my knees buckle. I grabbed the edge of the casket to steady myself, and all I could think was, how? How did I not see this coming? Before I tell you what was in that envelope, I need you to do something for me. Please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I need to know I'm not alone in this, because what I discovered that day at my son's funeral, it was just the beginning. My hands shook so violently that the papers rattled like leaves in a storm. I collapsed into the front pew, my elderly knees finally giving out, and forced myself to read every word. The funeral director hovered nearby, clearly confused about whether to proceed, but I couldn't think about that. I couldn't think about anything except what was printed on these pages. The first document was an email chain, dated 2 years ago, from Michael to Lauren. "She'll never know," he wrote. "My mother is too trusting, too blind with love to see what we're doing. By the time she figures it out, if she ever does, we'll be set for life." I felt bile rise in my throat. Set for life? What did that mean? The next page was a bank statement, my bank statement. But these weren't transactions I recognized. Withdrawals, large withdrawals, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, $12,000, $20,000, all from my savings account, the account I'd built up over decades of sacrifice, the account that held my pension, my security, everything I had. The account that should have had nearly $230,000 in it. The current balance showed $847. I gasped, the sound echoing in that empty funeral home. My savings, my entire life savings, gone. But how? I never authorized these withdrawals. Then I saw it. The signature on the authorization forms. My signature. Except I'd never signed these documents. The handwriting was close, but not quite right. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had been systematically draining my accounts for years. Another document slipped from the pile. A deed to my house. The house I'd owned outright for 15 years. The house I'd worked myself to the bone to pay off. According to this document, dated 8 months ago, I'd transferred the title to Michael Wallace. My son now owned my home. Except I'd never signed this either. Another forgery. Another theft. Mrs. Wallace? The funeral director touched my shoulder gently. Are you all right? Should I call someone? There's no one to call, I whispered, the truth of it crushing me. Emma, my daughter, lived in London, and we'd barely spoken in 3 years after a falling out over money. Money I now realized Michael had probably poisoned her against me about. My friends? Most had passed away or moved into care homes. I was alone, exactly as Michael and Lauren had wanted me. I kept reading, email after email revealing their plan. Michael had accessed my accounts by stealing my banking passwords. He'd watched me type them in during his visits, those visits where he'd seemed so caring, so attentive, bringing me tea while I paid my bills online. He'd been memorizing my every keystroke. Lauren's responses to his emails made my stomach turn. Perfect, baby. Once we have everything, we can finally dump this dead weight. Your mother has been bleeding you dry your whole life with her guilt trips. She's exhausted my patience. This is our revenge for every time she made you feel obligated to her. Bleeding him dry? Guilt trips? I'd given him everything. I'd sacrificed my own happiness, my own life, so he could succeed. And this was how he saw it? As some burden? As something he needed revenge for? Another document showed they'd taken out credit cards in my name. $17,000 in debt on cards I didn't know existed. Another showed loans, personal loans totaling $43,000, all with my forged signature. They'd destroyed my credit, stolen my identity, and left me with nothing but debt. The final page was a letter, written by Michael, dated 3 weeks before his death. Mum, it began, and I almost laughed at the cruel irony of that word. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not dead, just gone. Lauren and I are leaving New Zealand. We have your money, your house, everything. We'll sell the house for at least $900,000 in this market, settle your debts, and still have over $1 million to start fresh in Australia. You can't prove anything. We've been too careful. And honestly, you deserve this. You spent my whole childhood making me feel like I owed you something for raising me. Newsflash. Parents are supposed to raise their children. You don't get a medal for doing the bare minimum. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. The bare minimum? I'd given him everything. Everything. But wait, if this letter said he was leaving, then why was he dead? Something wasn't adding up. Michael's letter said he was leaving, running away with Lauren to Australia. But he was dead. Very dead. Lying in that casket right in front of me. What had happened between writing that letter 3 weeks ago and ending up in a funeral home? I stood on shaking legs and walked to the casket. I'd barely looked at him during the viewing, too consumed by grief and shock. Now I forced myself to really see. Michael lay there in his best suit, hands folded peacefully across his chest, looking almost asleep, but something caught my eye. His hands, his ring finger specifically. His wedding ring was missing. Michael never took off that ring. He'd told me on his wedding day that he'd wear it until the day he died, so where was it? And why did his face look strange? The makeup was heavy, covering something. I reached out with trembling fingers and touched his cheek. It felt wrong, too stiff, too cold in a way that seemed artificial even for death. Mrs. Wallace, please don't touch. The funeral director started, but I ignored him. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone from my purse, the old flip phone Michael had always mocked me for keeping, and dialed the only person I could think of, Detective Sarah Morrison. She'd been Emma's friend growing up, before Emma moved away. I still had her number from a neighborhood watch meeting years ago. Sarah Morrison, she answered on the third ring. Sarah, it's Catherine Wallace, Emma's mother. I need your help. Something's wrong. Very wrong. I explained everything in a rush. The empty funeral, Lauren's envelope, the stolen money, and the letter that didn't make sense. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Catherine," she said carefully, "I need you to listen to me. Don't let them bury Michael tomorrow. I'm coming to the funeral home right now. Don't let that body leave your sight." "Why? What's happening?" "I can't say yet, but I've been investigating financial fraud cases in Auckland for 6 months, and your son's name came up." "I couldn't tell you. Family privacy laws. But if what you're telling me is true, this case just got much bigger." She arrived 20 minutes later, bringing 2 other officers with her. The funeral director protested, but Sarah's badge silenced him quickly. She approached the casket, pulled on latex gloves, and did exactly what I'd done, examined Michael's face closely. Then she did something that made my heart stop. She pulled out her phone and took photographs, lots of them. Close-ups of his hands, his face, his neck. Then she turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "Mrs. Wallace, when was the last time you actually saw Michael alive, in person?" "3 months ago. He came for Sunday dinner. He seemed distant, preoccupied. He left early, said he had work. That was the last time." Sarah nodded slowly. "And who identified the body after his death?" "Lauren. She called me and said there'd been a car accident. She said she'd already identified him at the hospital, that I didn't need to put myself through that trauma. I trusted her." "Did you see any accident reports? Death certificate?" "Lauren said she'd handle everything. She said I was too distraught." Sarah exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Mrs. Wallace, I need to ask you something, and I need you to stay calm. Is it possible that the man in this casket isn't your son?" The room spun. "What? No, that's Michael." "I'd know my own son. Would you?" "When's the last time you saw him without a beard?" I thought back. Michael had grown a full beard 2 years ago. Before that, God, I hadn't seen his bare face in years. And this body's face was clean-shaven, heavily made up, and I'd only glanced at it through tears and grief. Sarah pulled back the sleeve of the corpse's jacket, revealing the forearm. No tattoo. Michael had gotten a small tattoo of a compass on his right forearm for his 35th birthday. I'd thought it was foolish at the time, but he'd been proud of it. This body had nothing. "Oh my God," I whispered, backing away from the casket. "If that's not Michael, then where is he?" Sarah's face was grim. "That's what we're going to find out. But Mrs. Wallace, if your son is alive and faked his own death after stealing your life savings, we're looking at fraud, identity theft, and now possibly murder. Because if this isn't Michael in the casket, then who is it?" The funeral home transformed into a crime scene within the hour. Yellow tape cordoned off the area around the casket. Forensic specialists arrived with equipment and cameras, and I sat in the corner of that room, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over my shoulders, watching my son's funeral become a criminal investigation. Detective Morrison sat beside me with a notepad. "Catherine, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. When did you first notice money missing?" I shook my head, shame flooding through me. "I didn't notice. I'm not good with computers. Michael always said I should let him help manage my finances. He set up online banking for me about 3 years ago. He said it would be easier. I trusted him. How often did you check your balances?" "Maybe once a month." I'd log in. Michael had written my password down for me, and I'd see that my pension was deposited. The numbers looked reasonable. I didn't study the transactions carefully. I thought I was safe. He was my son. Sarah's expression softened. "This isn't your fault. These are sophisticated crimes. The people who commit them are expert manipulators." She paused. "Tell me about Lauren. How did she seem in the months before Michael's supposed death?" I thought back, trying to see past my grief to the details I'd missed. "She was different, cold. She stopped inviting me for dinners about 6 months ago. When I'd call, she'd say Michael was busy. Then about 2 months ago, she told me they were having marital problems. She said Michael was stressed about work, that he might need space. I thought she was trying to protect their privacy. Did Michael mention anything about Australia? Travel plans? New job opportunities? Nothing. But we weren't talking much by then. Every conversation felt strained. He'd get irritated when I asked about his life, called me clingy. My voice cracked. I thought I was losing him emotionally. I never imagined I was losing everything else too. One of the forensic specialists approached Sarah. "Detective, We've got preliminary fingerprints from the body, running them through the database now. But there's something else. This body has surgical scars consistent with extensive plastic surgery. Recent work, maybe 6 months old. Someone wanted this person to look like someone else. My blood ran cold. You mean someone had surgery to look like Michael? That's one theory, Sarah said. Or Michael had surgery to look different, and this is his old face, literally. We've seen it in fraud cases. People desperate to disappear sometimes find homeless individuals or terminally ill patients, offer them money, convince them to undergo surgery, and then, she trailed off, not needing to finish. Then kill them, I whispered. Stage their own death, take the insurance money and run. How much was Michael's life insurance policy? I felt sick. $500,000. Lauren showed me the policy 6 months ago, said they'd increased it because they were planning to start a family. I thought it was responsible. I laughed bitterly. They were planning all right, just not a family. Sarah made notes rapidly. So we're potentially looking at your savings, $230,000 stolen over 2 years. The equity in your house, approximately $900,000 if sold. Credit card fraud, $17,000. Personal loans, $43,000. And a life insurance policy, $500,000. That's approximately $1.7 million in total theft and fraud. The number hit me like a physical blow. $1.7 million, my entire life's worth, converted into their ticket to freedom. And they'd thought I'd never figure it out. They'd counted on me being too old, too trusting, too broken by grief to investigate. Another officer approached with a laptop. Detective, we pulled Lauren Wallace's travel records. She flew to Sydney, Australia yesterday morning. One-way ticket. Paid in cash at the airport. Alone? Sarah asked sharply. Passenger manifest shows 1 ticket under her name. What about Michael Wallace? Any records of him leaving New Zealand? Nothing recent under that name. But the officer pulled up more screens. There's a Mark Wilson who purchased a ticket to Sydney 6 weeks ago. Paid cash. The airport security footage is automatically deleted after 30 days, so we can't verify, but the timing is suspicious. Sarah turned to me. Catherine, did Michael have any distinguishing features? Birthmarks, scars, anything that couldn't be changed with surgery? I thought desperately. A scar on his left shoulder blade. He fell off his bike when he was 12, needed 16 stitches. It's about 3 inches long, shaped like a crescent moon. Sarah nodded to the forensic specialists. They carefully turned the body in the casket, lifted the shirt. There was no scar. This definitely wasn't Michael. He's alive, I said, the reality settling over me like ice. My son is alive, and he let me grieve him. He let me sit here crying over a stranger's body while he's probably sipping cocktails in Australia with my money. Sarah squeezed my hand. We'll find him. But Catherine, I need to prepare you. International fraud cases are complex. Even if we locate him, extradition can take years. And recovering the money? That's even harder. These people usually transfer funds through multiple accounts, convert to cryptocurrency, make it nearly impossible to trace. So he wins? My voice rose. He destroys my life, fakes his death, and just gets away with it? Not if I can help it, Sarah said firmly. But we need to be smart. First, we identify this body. That's murder. That charge will make Australia much more cooperative about extradition. Second, we freeze every account we can find connected to Michael or Lauren. Third, she hesitated. Third, we use you. Use me? How? Lauren doesn't know we're onto them. She thinks you're home crying, believing Michael is dead. What if you weren't? What if you went to Australia? What if you found them? I stared at her. You want me to be bait? I want you to be the surprise they never saw coming. The mother they underestimated. The woman who's going to make sure they pay for every dollar, every lie, every moment of pain they caused. For the first time since entering that funeral home, I felt something other than grief and shock. I felt rage, pure, white-hot rage. When do we leave? I asked. 2 days later, Detective Morrison called me at 7 in the morning. I hadn't slept. I'd spent 48 hours in my house, the house that legally belonged to Michael now, though Sarah had managed to get a temporary injunction preventing its sale, going through every document, every photo, every memory, looking for clues I'd missed. Catherine, we've identified the body. You need to come to the station. I drove there in my old Honda, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The police station felt cold and institutional. Sarah met me at the entrance and guided me to a private conference room. Inside was another woman, probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and tired features. "Catherine, this is Margaret Chen. Margaret, this is Catherine Wallace." Margaret stood and extended her hand. I shook it, confused. "I don't understand. Who are you?" Her voice broke. "I was Daniel's mother, Daniel Chen. The police tell me he's the man in your son's casket." I sank into a chair. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say." Margaret sat across from me, tears streaming down her face. Danny was homeless. He'd been living on the streets for 3 years after a mental health crisis. I tried to help him, but he wouldn't accept treatment. 6 months ago, he disappeared completely. I filed a missing person report, but homeless people disappear all the time. The police couldn't find him. She looked at Sarah. "And now I know why. Because my son was being turned into your son." Sarah pulled up photographs on her laptop. "This is Daniel Chen's identification photo from 4 years ago." She showed us a picture of a thin young man with Asian features, nothing like Michael. "This is after the surgery." The next photo made me gasp. The resemblance to Michael was uncanny. Same nose, same jawline, same build. "How is this possible?" I whispered. "We tracked down the surgeon," Sarah explained. "Dr. Philip Warren struck off the medical register 2 years ago for ethics violations. He was performing illegal cosmetic procedures out of a private clinic in Wellington. He's been arrested. According to his records, Michael paid him $180,000 to perform extensive facial reconstruction on Daniel Chen, making him look like Michael. Michael told the surgeon it was for a film project, some elaborate makeup effects experiment. The surgeon didn't ask questions because the money was good." Margaret sobbed. "They used my son. They found him when he was vulnerable, probably offered him money or drugs or shelter, and turned him into a prop for their crime. And then they killed him." "The autopsy shows Daniel died from a deliberately induced overdose," Sarah said gently. "High levels of fentanyl. It would have been quick. He probably didn't suffer much." "Probably?" Margaret's voice turned sharp. "My son was murdered, so yours could steal money and disappear. Don't tell me he probably didn't suffer. His whole life was suffering, and your son made it worse." She was right. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Margaret, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Michael did this. I didn't know, but that doesn't matter. My son murdered your son. I will make sure he pays for that. I swear to you." Margaret looked at me with desperate eyes. "How? How will you make him pay when he's in Australia living his best life on stolen money, while our sons, hers dead, mine a criminal, are here in the wreckage?" "Because," Sarah interjected, "we're going to catch him, and Catherine is going to help." She laid out the plan. Through their investigation, they'd discovered Michael and Lauren had been sloppy in one crucial way. They'd purchased a property in Sydney under Lauren's maiden name, Lauren Hartley. Public records showed a waterfront apartment in Darling Harbour purchased 2 months ago for $2.3 million, cash purchase. "They're confident," Sarah explained. "Overconfident. They think they've won. Catherine, we can't officially extradite them yet. We need more evidence, more paperwork, and that takes months. But if you went there, if you confronted them, got them to confess on recording, that would change everything. You want me to wear a wire?" "Not exactly. Australia has strict laws about recording without consent. But if they made threats, if they said anything incriminating in a public place where others could witness it, that's different." I thought about the plan, about flying to Australia, about facing my son who'd betrayed me so completely, about looking Lauren in the eyes after she'd smiled at me at that funeral. Then I looked at Margaret, this broken mother who'd lost her son to my son's greed, and I knew what I had to do. "I'll go," I said. "But on one condition. Margaret comes with me." Sarah looked surprised. "Catherine, that's not—" "They took everything from both of us," I interrupted. "Our sons, our money, our dignity. Margaret deserves to face them too. Besides," I added, "they don't know about Daniel's identity yet. They think their plan worked perfectly. Seeing Margaret might shake them enough to make mistakes." Margaret stared at me. "You'd do that? Let me come?" "We're mothers," I said simply. "Mothers who've been destroyed by people we trusted. We deserve justice together." Sarah considered this. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but you both follow my instructions exactly. This is dangerous. Michael has already killed once. He won't hesitate to do it again if he feels cornered. That evening, I withdrew the last $800 from my nearly empty bank account. Margaret contributed $500 she'd been saving. We booked the cheapest flights we could find to Sydney, $1,300 total, departing in 2 days. Sarah provided us with the address of the Darling Harbour apartment and warned us repeatedly to be careful. Don't confront them directly, she insisted. Just observe, confirm they're there, get photos if you can. Let them see you, let them panic, but don't engage. We'll handle the rest through official channels once we have confirmation. But as I packed my small suitcase that night, I knew I wouldn't be following those instructions. Not completely, because Michael needed to see what he'd done. He needed to look into my eyes and see the mother he'd destroyed. And more than anything, he needed to know that this 65-year-old woman he'd dismissed as too old, too trusting, too broken to fight back, she was coming for him. The flight to Sydney felt endless. Margaret and I sat side by side in economy class, two elderly women who looked like they might be heading for a pleasant vacation. No one would have guessed we were flying toward a confrontation with murderers and thieves. Tell me about Danny, I said, as the plane crossed the Tasman Sea. Before everything went wrong, Margaret's face softened. He was beautiful, kind. So kind it hurt him, you know? He felt everyone's pain too deeply. When he was 25, he watched his fiancée die in a car accident. He was driving. It wasn't his fault. Drunk driver hit them. But Danny couldn't forgive himself. The guilt consumed him. He started using drugs to cope, lost his job, then his apartment. I tried everything. Rehab, therapy, medication. He'd get better for a while, then fall back. Eventually, he told me he couldn't bear my disappointment anymore, and left. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I never stopped looking for him. Every homeless person I saw, I wondered if it was Danny. And all that time, your son had found him, used him, killed him. Michael wasn't always like this, I said, though the words felt hollow. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't see it. I remember when he was 10, he stole money from my purse. I caught him, and instead of apologizing, he blamed his sister, said Emma had taken it and planted it in his room. I believed him. I punished Emma. The memory made me sick. Maybe I've been enabling his cruelty his whole life. We landed in Sydney at dawn. The city was waking up, beautiful and indifferent to our mission. We took a taxi to a cheap hotel in Ultimo, close enough to Darling Harbour, but far enough to not raise suspicion. After checking in, we headed straight to the address Sarah had given us. The apartment building was stunning. Glass and steel, modern luxury overlooking the harbor. The kind of place that cost tens of thousands just in monthly maintenance fees. Built with my money. Built with Margaret's son's life. How do we get in? Margaret asked. We can't just walk into the building. I watched the entrance. Residents came and went, scanning key cards. Then I saw someone. A young mother struggling with a stroller and shopping bags. I approached her with my friendliest grandmother smile. Oh dear, let me help you with that. I grabbed a shopping bag before she could protest. Margaret followed my lead, taking another bag. Thank you so much, the woman said gratefully. These doors are impossible to manage with the stroller. She scanned her card, and we followed her in, chatting about the weather, about babies, about nothing important. She got off on the 3rd floor. We continued to the penthouse level, floor 15. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in thick cream plush. Only 4 apartments on this floor. Unit 1502 had a small plaque that read, Hartley, in elegant script. My son was behind that door. My son and his accomplice wife, living in luxury while I'd worried about buying groceries. What now? Margaret whispered. Before I could answer, I heard voices inside the apartment. Then the door opened, and Lauren stepped out, wearing yoga pants and a designer jacket, holding a mat under her arm. She froze when she saw us. For a moment, nobody moved. The shock on her face was almost comical. Then it transformed into something uglier. Calculation. Catherine, she said carefully, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. But I already know. You're here living off money you stole from me, spending it on luxury apartments and yoga classes while I'm supposed to be home grieving my dead son. Except he's not dead, is he? Lauren's eyes darted to Margaret. Who's this? I'm Margaret Chen, Margaret said, her voice trembling with rage. Daniel Chen was my son, the man you and your husband murdered, the man you put in that casket pretending he was Michael, The color drained from Lauren's face. I don't know what you're talking about. You're both clearly confused. Grief does strange things to people. Catherine, you should go home. Get some help. Michael, I shouted past her into the apartment. Michael, get out here. He's not. Lauren started, but then he appeared. My son. Alive. Standing in the doorway of that luxury apartment wearing silk pajamas and holding a coffee cup. His face was different, subtly altered by surgery. I now understood. No beard, slightly different nose, fuller lips, but I'd know those eyes anywhere. My son's eyes. Hello, Mum, he said calmly. Too calmly, like he'd been expecting this. How did you find us? You killed my son, Margaret said, stepping forward. You found him when he was vulnerable, paid a surgeon to make him look like you, then murdered him so you could fake your death and steal from your own mother. How? How could you do that? Michael sipped his coffee. The casualness of it made me want to scream. Danny? That was his name? Honestly, I didn't ask. He was a junkie living under a bridge. I gave him a purpose. 6 months of meals, a warm bed, good drugs, then a quick death. That's more than he had before. I practically did him a favor. A favor? Margaret lunged toward him. I caught her arm, holding her back. You murdered him. He was a person. He was my son. And he's gone now, and there's nothing you can do about it, Michael said, his voice cold. Just like there's nothing either of you can do about any of this. You think coming here will change anything? You think confronting us matters? Here's the reality. I've won. We've won. We have the money. We have the life. And you have nothing. Michael stepped fully into the hallway, closing the apartment door behind him. Lauren stood beside him, her earlier shock replaced by a cold confidence. They looked like a perfect couple standing there. Young, beautiful, successful. Nobody would guess they'd built their dream on murder and theft. Let me explain something to you both, Michael continued, his voice condescending. You're here illegally. Tourist visas. You come to my home, make wild accusations, cause a scene. I call the police, have you arrested for harassment. You get deported. Your investigation in New Zealand falls apart because you've committed crimes here. So maybe think very carefully about your next move. My hands shook, but I forced myself to speak clearly. You stole $1.7 million from me. You murdered an innocent man. You made me grieve you. And you're standing here acting like you're the victim? I'm not a victim, Michael snapped. I'm finally free. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up with you? Everything was about sacrifice. I worked 2 jobs for you. I gave up my life for you. You owe me. Every single day was a guilt trip. Well, guess what? I don't owe you anything. You chose to have children. That was your choice, your responsibility. I didn't ask to be born. The words cut deeper than I'd expected. I never said you owed me. I just loved you. I just wanted you to have a better life than I did. And I do now, he said cruelly. Thanks to your money. Thanks to your stupidity in trusting me. You know what the best part was? How easy it was. You just handed over your passwords, your personal information, everything. You were so desperate to feel needed, to feel useful, that you let me access everything. It took less than an hour to set up the system to drain your accounts. Lauren laughed. Actually laughed. She's standing here crying, Michael. This is pathetic. Let's just go back inside. Wait, Margaret said suddenly. I need to understand something. Danny was my son. He had problems, yes, but he was a person. How did you find him? How did you choose him? Michael shrugged. Homeless shelter in Wellington. I volunteered there for 3 months, told everyone I wanted to give back to the community. Really, I was looking for the perfect candidate. Someone with no close family actively searching, someone with substance abuse issues who wouldn't ask too many questions, someone approximately my build and height. Danny checked all the boxes. You volunteered at a homeless shelter to find someone to murder, I said slowly. You spent 3 months pretending to be charitable while actually shopping for a victim. I prefer to think of it as efficient planning, Michael replied. I gained his trust, offered him a deal, 6 months of meals, shelter, and drugs in exchange for undergoing some cosmetic procedures, told him it was for a medical study. He agreed immediately. Addicts always do when you offer them what they need. And then you killed him? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. The fentanyl overdose was quick, Lauren said, as if that made it better. We made sure he was high when it happened. He probably didn't even know. I stared at this woman I'd welcomed into my family. You helped plan this. You participated in murder. I helped plan our freedom, Lauren corrected. Do you know how exhausting it was pretending to like you? Pretending to care about your boring stories and your constant need for attention? Every Sunday dinner was torture, but I smiled, played the perfect daughter-in-law because I knew the payoff would be worth it. The payoff of $1.7 million, I said. Plus the life insurance you haven't collected yet. Michael's smile widened. Oh, that's the beauty of the plan. Lauren is still legally my widow. We waited 3 months, proper grieving period, before she relocated here for a fresh start. The insurance company will pay out any day now, another $500,000. Then we're set forever. We can travel, buy whatever we want, live without ever working again. You're both monsters, Margaret said. How do you sleep at night? In a very comfortable bed in a penthouse apartment, Lauren replied. Catherine, Margaret, I'll give you both credit. You figured out more than we expected. But it doesn't matter. We've committed the perfect crime. Danny's body was cremated yesterday. What? Margaret's voice was a broken sob. Per the family's wishes, Lauren continued. All evidence destroyed. The death certificate is official. Michael is legally dead. His accounts are closed, transferred, converted into offshore holdings and cryptocurrency. Untraceable. The house in Auckland is listed for sale under a trust name. By the time anyone could freeze the assets, if they even could, the money will be gone, moved through so many channels it's impossible to follow. Michael checked his watch. A Rolex, I noticed, probably cost more than my entire year's pension. This has been a fascinating reunion, Mom, but Lauren has yoga and I have a golf game. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to go back to New Zealand. You're going to accept that you lost. Because if you don't, if you keep pushing, keep investigating, keep making noise, we'll disappear again. New identities, new country. And you'll never see $1 of that money recovered. And if we go to the police here? I challenged. With what evidence? Michael spread his hands. Your word against ours? We have documentation showing every transaction was authorized. We have your signatures, which, yes, are forged, but good luck proving that. We have a death certificate, a cremated body, and legal documentation of everything. You have conspiracy theories from 2 grieving elderly women. Who do you think they'll believe? He was right, and he knew it. The smugness on his face made me want to scream. But then I remembered something Sarah had told me before I left Auckland. Something about men like Michael. Men who thought they were brilliant, always making one fatal mistake. They couldn't resist explaining how clever they were. You're right, I said slowly. You've won. But can I ask you something? Just one question? Mother to son? Michael rolled his eyes. Fine. One question. Why did you smile at the funeral? I looked at Lauren. When you handed me that envelope, you smiled. Why? Lauren's expression was pure venom. Because I wanted you to know. I wanted you to spend the rest of your miserable life knowing that your precious son hated you enough to destroy you, that every sacrifice you made was meaningless, that you failed as a mother so completely that your own child would rather commit murder than spend another day pretending to care about you. I wanted you to die knowing you were a failure. The words hung in the air, and that's when I saw him. Detective Marcus Sullivan from the Australian Federal Police, standing at the end of the hallway with 3 other officers. Sarah had arranged it all. The wire I was wearing, hidden in my watch, had broadcast everything to them. Michael's face went white. We didn't consent to being recorded. That's illegal in Australia. Actually, Detective Sullivan said, stepping forward. Under Australian law, recording is legal if one party consents and there's reasonable suspicion of serious criminal activity. Mrs. Wallace obtained a warrant before coming here. Everything you just said was recorded and admissible. And more importantly, you just confessed to murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Michael Wallace, Lauren Wallace, you're both under arrest. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Michael tried to run, actually tried to push past the officers and make it to the stairwell. They tackled him to the ground, his expensive silk pajamas tearing as he struggled. Lauren screamed, hurling accusations and insults, her perfect composure shattered. You can't do this, Michael shouted as they cuffed him. She's my mother. She set me up. This is entrapment. Entrapment requires inducement, Detective Sullivan said calmly. Your mother didn't induce you to confess. You did that all on your own. Should have been a little less proud of yourself, mate. They read them their rights, Australian style, and led them away. Michael looked at me one last time as they took him to the elevator. His eyes weren't apologetic or remorseful. They were furious, entitled rage that he'd been caught, that his perfect plan had fallen apart. "I hate you," he said clearly. "I've always hated you. You ruined my life by being born, and now you've ruined it again." The elevator doors closed on his face. I stood there in that silent hallway, Margaret beside me, both of us shaking. After a moment, Margaret took my hand. "It's over," she whispered. "We got them." But I knew it wasn't over. Not really. The legal battles would take years. The extradition process, the trials, the attempts to recover the money. And even if we won every battle, even if they went to prison and the money was returned, it would never undo what they'd done. Danny was still dead. My relationship with my son was still destroyed. The betrayal would never stop hurting. Detective Sullivan returned after securing Michael and Lauren in transport vehicles. "Mrs. Wallace, Ms. Chen, that was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. You could have been killed, but we weren't," I said. "And now they'll face justice." "They will," he agreed. "But I need to prepare you both. This is going to be a long process. International fraud cases, murder investigations, these take time. Years, potentially. And recovering the money? Some of it's already been moved offshore, converted to cryptocurrency. We'll freeze what we can, but realistically, you might not get it all back." "I don't care about the money," Margaret said fiercely. "I want them punished for what they did to Danny." "That we can guarantee," Sullivan assured her. "The murder charge is solid. We have their confession on tape. They're not walking away from this." Over the next several days, the investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Sullivan's team discovered that Michael and Lauren had been planning this for nearly 4 years. The volunteering at the homeless shelter had started that long ago. They'd run through several potential victims before finding Danny. Men who'd gotten suspicious, backed out, or were deemed unsuitable for various reasons. They'd opened accounts in 3 different countries. They'd created shell corporations. They'd even consulted with a lawyer about, hypothetically, how someone might fake their death legally. The lawyer, fortunately, had refused to help and had kept detailed notes about the suspicious consultation. The surgeon, Dr. Warren, was cooperating fully now that he faced accessory to murder charges. He provided all his records, including before and after photos of Danny's transformation. The images were horrifying. This young man systematically being turned into someone else, piece by piece, over 6 months. "He was awake during some of it," Dr. Warren told investigators, his voice shaking. "He told me it hurt. I gave him more drugs. I should have stopped. I should have called someone. But they'd paid me $180,000, and I needed the money after losing my license." Everyone had their price, apparently, even human decency. Sarah flew over from Auckland to help coordinate with the Australian authorities. She met me and Margaret at a cafe in Darling Harbour, ironically just a few blocks from Michael and Lauren's seized apartment. "The good news is they're not getting bail," she reported. "The judge deemed them flight risks, which, given they literally faked a death to flee the country, was an easy call. They'll stay in custody until trial." "How long?" I asked. 18 months, maybe 2 years before trial. "But Catherine, there's something else. Emma called me." My daughter. I hadn't spoken to Emma since the funeral. She'd called once, briefly, offering condolences, but saying she couldn't leave London for the service. I hadn't pushed. Our relationship had been strained for so long. "What did she say?" Sarah hesitated. "She wants to talk to you. She says she needs to explain something about why she distanced herself from the family 3 years ago." My stomach dropped. "Michael got to her, too, didn't he?" "Talk to her," Sarah said gently. "I think you need to hear this from her." That evening, I video-called Emma from my hotel room. She appeared on the screen, older than I remembered, her face drawn and tired. She looked like she'd been crying. "Mum," she said immediately, "I'm so sorry. About everything. About Michael. About the money. About not being there for you. But most of all, I'm sorry for believing him." "Believing him about what?" 3 years ago, Michael told me you were becoming senile. He showed me evidence. Emails you supposedly sent that made no sense. Bank transactions he claimed you couldn't remember making. Doctors' reports about cognitive decline. He said you were too proud to admit it, that you were getting dangerous with money, that you might hurt yourself or others. He convinced me that you needed help but were refusing it. Tears streamed down her face. He said, if I confronted you about it, you'd get defensive and cut me off completely. He said the best thing I could do was give you space and let him handle it. He was managing your finances to protect you, or so he claimed. I thought I was helping by staying away. I thought I was giving you dignity by not forcing you to acknowledge your decline. I closed my eyes, the full scope of Michael's manipulation becoming clear. He isolated me, made sure I had no one to turn to when he started stealing. I'm so stupid, Emma sobbed. I should have called you, should have verified. But the evidence looked real, and he was so convincing, and I was busy with my life in London, and it was easier to just believe him and not deal with it. Emma, this isn't your fault. Michael has been manipulating people his entire life. I missed it. You missed it. We all missed it. What happens now? She asked. Now? Now we fight. Will you come home? Not to Auckland? To Sydney? I could use your help. She nodded immediately. I'll be there in 2 days. We talked for another hour, rebuilding bridges burned by Michael's lies. And I realized something. He'd tried to take everything from me. My money, my home, my dignity, my son. But he'd failed to destroy what mattered most. I was still here, still standing, and I was going to make sure he paid for every lie, every theft, every moment of pain. Emma arrived in Sydney 3 days later, and seeing her walk through the airport arrivals gate felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd thought was lost forever. She hugged me tightly, both of us crying, and for the first time since that horrible funeral, I felt like I wasn't alone. I can't believe I fell for his lies, Emma said as we drove to the hotel. All those years we didn't talk because I thought you were losing your mind, and the whole time he was just isolating you so he could rob you. He's always been clever, I admitted. When you two were children, I thought that cleverness would serve him well in life. I never imagined he'd use it for evil. Margaret had become something of a friend during those days in Sydney. She and Emma bonded quickly over their shared fury at Michael and Lauren. The three of us, 3 generations of women Michael had tried to destroy, became an unlikely team. Detective Sullivan kept us updated on the case's progress. The forensic accounting was staggering. Michael and Lauren had stolen even more than we'd initially calculated. They'd taken out credit cards in the names of 3 other elderly people they'd met through Michael's volunteer work, draining another $68,000 before those victims noticed. We're up to nearly $1.8 million in confirmed theft, Sullivan told us, and we're still finding more. This wasn't just about you, Catherine. This was a pattern. You were just the biggest score. The other victims came forward. A 73-year-old man named Robert, who'd lost $45,000. A widow named Patricia, who'd lost $23,000. They'd all trusted Michael because he seemed so kind, so helpful, so eager to assist elderly people with their complicated finances. I wanted to press charges, but I was embarrassed, Robert told me when we met. My kids already thought I was losing it. Admitting I'd been scammed would have just confirmed their fears, so I stayed quiet and absorbed the loss. That's what he counted on, I said. Our shame, our pride, our fear of looking foolish. The trial preparation took months. The prosecutors, both Australian and New Zealand authorities were involved now, built a case that was absolutely damning. They had the recorded confession. They had the financial records. They had Dr. Warren's testimony about the surgery. They had everything. Michael and Lauren's lawyers tried every strategy. They claimed the recording was illegally obtained, rejected. They claimed entrapment, rejected. They claimed mental illness. The psychiatric evaluations showed both were perfectly sane and fully aware of their actions. They even tried to claim that Danny had consented to die, that it was assisted suicide. Nobody believed that for a second. Emma threw herself into helping me. She'd worked as a paralegal in London before moving into marketing, and she knew how to organize documents, track evidence, build timelines. She created a comprehensive file of every transaction Michael had made using my money, every forged signature, every fraudulent account. Look at this, she said one evening, showing me her laptop. He bought a Mercedes in Germany 6 months before he died, paid 95,000 euros. He shipped it to Australia under his new identity, Mark Wilson. That car is still in Sydney, registered to the false name. It's physical evidence we can seize. Sarah flew back to Sydney when the trial date was finally set. 18 months after the arrest, we were going to face Michael and Lauren in court. The charges were extensive. Murder in the first degree for Danny's death, multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, forgery, theft, conspiracy, and money laundering. The prosecutors are pushing for life without parole for Michael, Sarah told us. For Lauren, Probably 30 years minimum. The evidence is overwhelming. But I need to prepare you. They're going to try to paint you as a vindictive mother, Catherine. They're going to say you drove Michael to this with your constant demands and guilt trips. Let them, I said firmly. I know the truth. My son is a murderer and a thief. Nothing they say can change that. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the little boy Michael had been. I'd loved him so fiercely. Where had that love gone wrong? Had I smothered him with expectations? Had I made him feel obligated in some terrible way that twisted him? Emma found me sitting on the hotel balcony at 3 a.m. Mom, you okay? I keep wondering if I caused this, if I was a bad mother. Stop, Emma said firmly. She sat beside me and took my hand. Michael made his choices. Bad people come from good families all the time. You loved us. You sacrificed for us. You gave us every opportunity. I turned out fine. The difference between Michael and me isn't how we were raised. It's who we chose to be. He chose cruelty. That's not on you. Your sister called, she added after a moment. She's been following the news. She wants to know if you're okay. I'd almost forgotten. I had another daughter too, Sarah. She lived in Perth, and we hadn't spoken in a decade after a falling out I could barely remember now. What did she say? She said she's sorry she wasn't there for you. She said if you want, she'll come to the trial. Sit with us. Show Michael that he didn't destroy this family. I cried then, hard sobs that shook my whole body. Emma held me, and I realized that while Michael had tried to take everything, he'd actually given me something unexpected. He'd brought my daughters back to me. His cruelty had reminded us what family really meant. Tell Sarah yes, I whispered. Tell her I'd love to see her. The trial began on a cold Sydney morning in late September. The courtroom was packed. Media, victims, supporters, curious onlookers. Michael and Lauren sat at the defense table, both looking haggard after months in custody. Michael's expensive surgery had aged poorly without proper maintenance. He looked older than his 39 years. Good. Margaret sat on one side of me, Emma on the other. Sarah, my daughter Sarah, had arrived that morning and sat beside Emma, her hand resting on my shoulder. We were a wall of women Michael had tried to break. And we were still standing. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Jennifer Chen, no relation to Margaret, but they'd bonded over the shared name, began her opening statement. This case is about greed, about cruelty, about two people who decided that their comfort was worth more than an elderly woman's life savings, more than a vulnerable man's life, more than any shred of human decency. The evidence will show that Michael Wallace and Lauren Wallace are not victims of circumstance or a moment of weakness. They are calculating predators who spent years planning and executing one of the most heartless crimes I've seen in 20 years as a prosecutor. She detailed everything: the timeline, the forgeries, Danny's murder, the confession we'd recorded. By the time she finished, several jury members were crying. Then it was the defense's turn, and they did exactly what Sarah had warned they'd do. Catherine Wallace was a controlling, manipulative mother who made her son's entire life about her sacrifices. She guilted him constantly, made him feel like he could never be good enough, never repay her for simply doing what parents are supposed to do, raise their children. Michael finally snapped under decades of psychological abuse. I wanted to scream. Emma gripped my hand so tight it hurt, but we stayed silent. We let them speak, because we knew the evidence would speak louder. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony, evidence, and painful revelations. We heard from the other victims. Robert and Patricia told their stories. The prosecutors showed security footage of Michael volunteering at the homeless shelter, specifically seeking out Danny. They showed the financial trail, every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every calculated step of the plan. Dr. Warren testified about the surgeries, his voice shaking as he described what he'd done to Danny. I knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself it was legitimate because I needed the money. I will regret that decision for the rest of my life. Emma testified about how Michael had manipulated her into abandoning me. He showed me fake medical records, fabricated emails. He convinced me my mother was losing her mind so I wouldn't question why he was managing her finances. He isolated her systematically, removing every person who might notice what he was doing. Sarah, my daughter Sarah, testified too. My brother called me 5 years ago and told me our mother had said terrible things about me, things she'd never said. He showed me text messages that I now know were fabricated. I cut off contact because I believed him. He did this to all of us, turned us against each other so no one would protect her. But the most powerful testimony came from Margaret. She stood in that witness box, 73 years old and trembling, and told them about Danny. My son was ill. He needed help, not exploitation. Michael Wallace found him at his most vulnerable and turned him into a tool, a prop for a crime. Then he murdered him. Danny wasn't perfect, but he was my child, and he deserved to live. Michael's defense team tried to paint Danny as a willing participant who'd accepted money for the surgeries knowing what would happen. But the prosecutors demolished that argument with evidence showing Danny had been increasingly drugged and confused in his final weeks, and that Michael had hidden the true nature of the plan from him until it was too late. When it was Michael's turn to testify, I watched my son walk to the stand and swear to tell the truth. Then he looked directly at me and said, "I don't regret what I did. My mother destroyed my childhood with her neediness and her demands. Taking her money was justice. The only thing I regret is getting caught." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel. But Michael just smiled, that cold smile I'd seen in the hallway of his apartment building. He didn't feel remorse. He felt entitled. Lauren was smarter. She tried to play the victim. I was manipulated by Michael. He controlled me. I was afraid of him. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But the prosecutors showed emails proving she'd been an equal partner in planning, that she'd researched how to commit insurance fraud, that she'd personally administered the fentanyl that killed Danny. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict in a clear, steady voice. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant Michael Wallace guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Lauren Wallace guilty. Guilty. Guilty on every charge, all 47 counts between them. Michael's face went white. Lauren started crying. Real tears now, not the fake ones she'd tried during testimony. They'd believed until the last moment that their charm, their youth, their clever lawyers would save them. They'd been wrong. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. When that day came, the courtroom was packed again. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Justice Helen Morrison, looked at Michael and Lauren with undisguised contempt. In 30 years on the bench, I've seen many terrible crimes, but the calculated cruelty you two displayed is extraordinary. You didn't act out of desperation or temporary madness. You spent years planning how to destroy an elderly woman's life and murder a vulnerable man for money. Michael Wallace, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 40 years. Lauren Wallace, I sentence you to 35 years in prison. You will both be extradited to New Zealand to face additional fraud charges there. They were led away in chains. Michael looked at me one last time. "I hope you're happy," he spat. "You destroyed your own son." "No," I said clearly. "You destroyed yourself." The financial recovery took another year. The prosecutors managed to seize and freeze most of the stolen money. About $1.4 million of the $1.8 million stolen. The rest had been spent or lost in bad cryptocurrency investments. The seized properties, the Sydney apartment, the Mercedes, jewelry, and other assets were sold to recover more funds. I got back approximately $1.2 million after legal fees and other expenses. Not everything, but enough. Enough to secure my future, pay off the debts Michael had created in my name, and even set aside money for Emma and Sarah. The other victims, Robert, Patricia, and 2 others we discovered during the investigation, received their stolen money back as well. We'd all survived, though we were changed. Margaret used part of Danny's life insurance payout, she was his next of kin, and the policy Michael hadn't known about, to establish a foundation helping homeless individuals with mental health issues. Danny's Memorial, she called it, so no one else's son can be exploited the way mine was. I moved to Sydney to be closer to Emma. Sarah visited regularly from Perth. We were rebuilding our family, carefully and slowly, learning to trust again. The house in Auckland was sold. I couldn't live there anymore, not with all those memories of betrayal. But I was okay. I was more than okay. On the first anniversary of the trial verdict, Emma, Sarah, Margaret, and I met at a cafe overlooking Darling Harbour. We toasted with coffee. None of us were big drinkers. And Margaret raised her cup. To Danny, to Catherine, to all of us who survived. To justice, Emma added. To new beginnings, Sarah said. I looked at these three strong women, my daughters and my unlikely friend, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. I want to tell you all something, I said. When Lauren handed me that envelope at the funeral, when I read what Michael had done, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything, my son, my money, my dignity, my future. But I was wrong. Yes, I lost those things. But I found something more valuable. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found daughters who came back to me. I found that I could survive the worst betrayal imaginable and still be standing. I looked at each of them. Michael tried to break me because he thought I was weak. An old woman, easy to manipulate, easy to destroy. But he forgot something. I'm 65 years old. I've buried a husband, raised 2 children alone, worked 2 jobs for decades, survived poverty and hardship and loss. I'm not weak. I'm not fragile. I'm a survivor. And survivors don't stay down. We all cried then. Good tears, healing tears, the kind of tears that wash away pain and leave room for hope. To everyone watching this, I want you to understand something. If you're being manipulated, if you're being stolen from, if someone is exploiting your trust, whether it's a family member or anyone else, you are not alone. You are not too old, too confused, or too powerless to fight back. Speak up. Ask for help. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And never, ever let anyone make you feel that seeking justice makes you vindictive. I got justice. My son is in prison for 40 years. Lauren will spend 35 years behind bars. Danny's death was avenged. My money was mostly recovered. But more than that, I got my dignity back. I got my life back. And I got my daughters back. That's worth more than any amount of money Michael could have stolen. Before I close, I want to ask you something. If my story touched you, if it made you think or feel or realize something about your own life, please like this video. Subscribe to this channel. There are so many stories like mine that need to be told. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me know I'm not alone. Let me know that telling my story mattered. Because that's what Michael never understood. He thought destroying me would leave nothing behind. But instead, it revealed everything I truly am. A mother, a survivor, a fighter, and I'm not done living yet. Thank you for listening to my story. From Sydney, Australia, where it's now evening and the harbor lights are twinkling outside my window, I'm Catherine Wallace, and I'm still here.